They say history is written by the victors. But what if it was also hidden by them? What if a continent, dismissed for centuries, held the keys to sciences that would take the rest of the world hundreds, even thousands of years to discover? Prepare to have your understanding of history shattered, because we're about to uncover 5 sciences that Africa mastered, while the world looked the other way. From the glowing furnaces of Tanzania to the priceless manuscripts of Timbuktu, Africa's scientific discoveries weren't just advanced, they were centuries ahead of their time. These weren't isolated moments of genius. They were entire systems of knowledge that built empires, healed the sick, and charted the cosmos. But for most of the world, this history was never told. It was silenced, dismissed, or stolen. For centuries, a single, damaging narrative was pushed that Africa was a continent without history, without innovation, without science. Textbooks filled our minds with the achievements of Greece, Rome, China, and Renaissance Europe, painting them as the sole cradles of human progress. But this story was a deliberate fabrication. African science was systematically erased, minimized, or rebranded by colonial powers. Why? Because a continent seen as primitive and uncivilized was easier to justify conquering, exploiting, and controlling. The narrative wasn't just biased, it was a tool of oppression. To admit that Africa had complex scientific traditions would have shattered the very foundation of colonial superiority. And so, the truth of Africa's innovation was buried under layers of prejudice, left to be forgotten in the sands of time and the footnotes of history books. But the evidence was always there, waiting to be rediscovered. Let's begin our journey in what is now Tanzania, around 2,000 years ago. Long before the Industrial Revolution in Europe, the Haya people were producing something extraordinary. Archaeologists discovered ancient furnaces, but these were unlike any others. They were blast furnaces, capable of reaching temperatures over 1,800 degrees Celsius. This was hundreds of degrees hotter than anything the Romans could achieve at the time. What did this intense heat allow them to do? They were forging carbon steel. This wasn't just regular iron. It was a superior metal, created by skillfully controlling the carbon content. It was a metallurgical breakthrough that European smiths would not replicate for more than a millennium. The Haya people had mastered a complex, preheated air technology to achieve these incredible temperatures. This wasn't an accident. It was a highly refined, deliberate scientific process passed down through generations, a testament to an incredible understanding of chemistry and engineering that history chose to ignore. Now, let's travel across the continent to West Africa, to the Dogon people of Mali. For centuries, their elders have passed down an oral tradition that is nothing short of baffling. Their sacred cosmology describes the star we call Sirius in incredible detail. But they don't just talk about the bright star we can all see. They speak of a companion star, a tiny, incredibly dense star that orbits Sirius every 50 years. They call it Ptolo. This companion star is invisible to the naked eye. In fact, Western astronomers only confirmed its existence in the 19th century and photographed it in 1970. We know it today as Sirius B, a white dwarf star. The Dogon tradition accurately described its elliptical orbit, its 50-year cycle, and its extreme density, calling it the smallest but heaviest thing in the sky. How could an ancient culture, without telescopes, possess such precise astronomical knowledge? This question has sparked intense debate. Was it ancient contact? A lost tradition of supervision? While we may never know the exact source of their knowledge, the Dogon cosmology stands as a profound challenge to our understanding of ancient astronomy and the limits of observation. Our next stop takes us back even further in time, over 7,000 years ago, to a desolate spot in the Egyptian Sahara. Here lies Nabta Playa, a site that rewrites the very origins of astronomy. Long before Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids, ancient peoples assembled a remarkable stone circle. At first, it might look like a random collection of rocks, but it's a sophisticated astronomical calendar. The stones align perfectly with the summer solstice, marking the arrival of the life-giving monsoon rains in this once fertile region. But it gets even more incredible. Researchers have discovered that the circle also maps the constellations, including a representation of Orion's belt, mirroring its position in the sky around 5000 BCE. This isn't just a simple calendar. It's one of the world's oldest known archaeoastronomical devices. It shows a deep, long-standing relationship with the cosmos, a scientific tradition born from the need to understand and predict the natural world to survive. Nabta Playa proves that the roots of Egyptian astronomy, and indeed world astronomy, run far deeper into African soil than previously imagined. Now, let's journey north to the legendary city of Timbuktu. For centuries, its name was synonymous with mystery and inaccessibility. But its true treasure wasn't gold, it was knowledge. At its peak, Timbuktu was a thriving center of scholarship, home to one of the world's first universities. Scribes and scholars produced hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on every subject imaginable. Among the most astonishing are the medical texts. Centuries before modern medicine established these practices, Timbuktu's manuscripts detailed complex surgical procedures, including cataract removal and bone setting. They contained advanced knowledge of anatomy, pharmacology, and the importance of hygiene in preventing infection. They documented the use of plants for anesthesia and the treatment of diseases like malaria. These weren't folk remedies. They were part of a sophisticated medical system based on observation, experimentation, and peer review. These texts show a deep understanding of the human body and disease that rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, contemporary European knowledge. They represent a library of healing that was nearly lost to the world. Finally, we travel to the lifeblood of Northeast Africa, the Nile River. For thousands of years, the civilizations of Egypt and Nubia depended on its annual flood. Too little water meant famine. Too much meant devastation. Predicting the flood was a matter of life and death, and they turned to the stars to do it. Using precise astronomical observations, they noticed that the floodwaters began to rise shortly after the star Sirius reappeared on the eastern horizon just before sunrise. This event, known as the heliacal rising of Sirius, became the cornerstone of their calendar and their agricultural system. They created sophisticated nilometers, stone staircases, and pillars marked with levels to measure the height of the flood with incredible accuracy. This combination of astronomy and hydrology allowed them to manage their resources, plan their harvests, and sustain complex societies for millennia. It was a perfect fusion of celestial observation and practical, earth-based science, a system that ensured the continuity of one of the world's greatest civilizations. These were not myths. These were not primitive beliefs. They were sciences, steel production that powered economies, star maps that guided survival, medical practices that saved lives, flood predictions that sustained empires. These were powerful systems of knowledge, tested and refined over generations, that kept entire civilizations alive and thriving. Yet, for so long, the credit was erased. In its place, colonial historians and writers left only silence, or worse, distorted the truth, painting a picture of a continent waiting to be discovered and civilized. The brilliance was there all along, but the world was told to look away. Africa was always a laboratory of brilliance. We just weren't allowed to see the results. But the story doesn't end in erasure. Today, a new chapter is being written. Through the tireless work of modern archaeologists, historians, and African scholars themselves, the evidence is being brought back into the light. From excavating ancient furnaces to painstakingly translating medieval manuscripts, the truth is being reassembled piece by piece. We are finally proving what should have been obvious all along. Science is a global human endeavor, and Africa's place at its forefront is undeniable and non-negotiable. The continent wasn't just a participant in the story of science. In many cases, it was writing the very first pages. They tried to hide Africa's sciences, to bury its genius under the weight of their own narratives. But the truth, like the fire in a Heya furnace, burns brighter than any lie. It's time to reclaim the story. If you believe this history needs to be heard, subscribe to History Rewritten. Together, let's help uncover the brilliance they tried so desperately to erase. Thank you for watching.